This is Steve from the Rebuilding Faith online community. I joined this community because, like many, I found myself increasingly disillusioned with the traditional church. All too often, their teachings seem to be at odds with what I believe to be Jesus' message of unconditional love. I was looking for a safe place I could learn and grow in my faith journey along with others on a similar journey, a place where I could freely explore questions, doubts, and different perspectives without judgment. I love the inspirational podcast and insightful comments from fellow community members. My favorite has been the book reading challenges. I love exploring contemporary authors alongside my fellow community members and realizing I am not alone. I feel closer to Jesus than I have in a long time.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Cabernet and Pray, where we sip the wine and we stir the faith. And today we're talking about hell. We're going to explore a terrific book that comes out about a week from when I'm posting this called Hellbent. Brian Recker is the author. He is an ex-evangelical pastor, is how he refers to himself. He talks about he began his deconstruction journey during the first Trump term because of Christian nationalism, which has only intensified. And he's got this book coming out on the 30th of this month about how evangelical spirituality is warped by punishment and the afterlife. And ultimately, he's helping us to reclaim the spirituality of Jesus. What I found when I read this book, not only did I think he tackled these ideas in a very practical and helpful way, but it's a book that gives you hope. If you're looking at everything right now and you're just going, man, this feels heavy and I don't know, this is one of those books you read and you go, all right, maybe there's a way forward. Maybe we can get our way out of this. And I really do think that Brian's one of those voices that is worth listening to and can help us in that regard. So this is episode 56, Hell Bent.
I've never shared this with anybody publicly. There's so many things happening in this conversation right now. 1,000 years from now, people are going to be looking at this podcast saying, so this was the breakthrough.
If this was Sports Center, that would be like such a hot take. Skip Bayless would have no idea. Stephen A. Smith would have no idea what to say if you drop that down. That is so good.
The joke I always say is like, how'd you learn so much? You got to drink a lot.
The power of food and beverage to lubricate an environment.
Resistance to change is hurting the church.
I'm not in the camp that God has a penis or a vagina or a body at all. I'm in the camp that God is a universal spirit.
This is the strangest podcast that I have been on. I don't even know what to do.
I'm kind of geeked up about this wine.
So this is my second glass, and it delivers a little more of a punch than I expected. So if I get a little loopy, it's your fault. You told me to drink on the show.
I will also say as a confession, I am a lightweight. So I've had like 3 sips of this wine and I'm already feeling it. So this is fun.
You've uncovered the mystery. You've exposed the formula.
You've just duct taped together a number of things that aren't normally hanging out together, and I'm here for it.
We're going to sit down at a table. We're going to have a glass of wine and some food, and we're going to talk about the beauty of Jesus.
Thank you for the hospitality that this particular podcast provides folks like myself, and I know others, to be curious around their faith practices.
I really appreciate this venue, what you're doing. It is fun, and yet you dig into the deep stuff.
I've heard about your podcast for a long time, and I love that you're a pastor and that you explore the world of faith through wine. That's very unique.
I will never forget the first time I bought a bottle of wine by myself, which was yesterday.
If you're familiar with drunk history, I thought it's like drunk theology. So I
got a little spicy there. It's the peach wine.
Apparently the wine is, here we are. Queer we are. Beer we are. No, it's wine, Jeremy.
By the way, drinking this Pinot Grigio at 3 o'clock in the afternoon is making me even more direct in my communication than I normally would be.
I know why you have your guests drink wine. It makes sense now. Yeah, I get it. A little bit of liquid courage to really unleash the beast.
I think you've got a good podcast. So throwing the wine bit in there, that's nice. That's it. Cabernet and Pray, yeah.
Welcome to the podcast, Brian Recker.
What's going on, Jeremy? Thanks for having me, bro.
He's all tatted up. For those of you who are only doing the audio version of this, you're missing quite the picture here. So I'll have to paint it a little bit for you. He's in the white tee. He's got all the tats, got the wine. You're a whole vibe right now. I'm digging it.
Yeah.
I'm here for it.
Try to give the people what they want,
All right, let's talk about what we're drinking, and then we're going to talk about a great book that's coming out soon. I am drinking. It's still in the throes, even though it's officially fall. It's still in the throes of summer here in Arizona. We still have 100-degree temperatures this week, and so I'm going white wine today. I'm doing a 2020 Authentique Brementown Riesling from my friend Nicholas Keeler in Oregon. And I'm enjoying this because it still is hot. I'm getting green apple and pear, little petroleum that you get with Riesling a lot, and it's quite nice. That's what I'm rocking. Brian, what are you drinking in your glass today?
Well, you're like a pro. Okay, so I will just say I'm not that much of a wine drinker. I'm usually a beer or liquor guy, but I went ahead and got a Cabernet because, it's Cabernet and Pray, and just felt like that would be the move. Couldn't go wrong there. I got one that was on sale, and it doesn't even say the year on here, bro. It's from California. It's Cabernet Sauvignon in California. I'm like, where's the year? It's like not even on the label. So maybe they were embarrassed by that. I'm not sure, but it's flavorful, full bodied. What are the notes? It says toasted oak and vanilla, and that feels right. Kind of jammy.
Okay.
We're jammy over here, I guess. I'm sorry.
The way I explain this to people if they get stuck is I say there's two kinds of wines at the end of the day. There's wines you like and there's wines you don't like. And it doesn't need to be more complicated than that.
I like it. I'm happy with my choice. I like reds typically over whites, but sometimes they're gross, and I don't really know how a better way to say that. But this one's not gross, so I feel good about it.
Well, cheers to you, and cheers to all of our listeners on another episode of Cabernet and Pray. Before we get into Brian's book, I want to ask a question that I know some of the answer to because I've read the book, but I'm excited for this answer because I've read the book. I know you have quite an answer for this. One of the questions I like to start with to give our listeners a chance to get a frame of reference for who you are, a little bit of your journey. If you were to look at the last 10 years of your life, how has your faith changed in the last 10 years?
Wow.
His eyes are big because he's got quite an answer for this one. You could go a lot of directions with this.
10 years ago, 2015 is really when things started for me. Well, that's not true. Okay. So 10 years ago with Donald Trump becoming the front runner of the Republican Party, that was really my first moment that I felt deeply disillusioned with evangelicalism. But technically, my story of deconstruction started even before that because I started out as a fundamentalist, and I moved when I left fundamentalism for evangelicalism, which was it felt like a very big progressive leap at the time. Actually, becoming an evangelical was like very edgy. That disappointed my parents, actually, who are still independent Baptist fundamentalists. But 2015 was when evangelicalism began to break for me 10 years ago. So yeah, in the last 10 years, it went from that initial sense of, is evangelicalism just kind of repackaged fundamentalism with slightly better vibes, and you can wear, at the time, skinny jeans and, have some tattoos and drink beer, but ultimately you're still in this exclusionary system that's primarily about domination. And with Trump becoming their guy, it's ultimately about power as well, and easily used as a tool for empire, which we saw on full display, probably in its full flowering in some ways, just the other day at that funeral / political rally, where you saw this incredible blending of, it was like an evangelical revival meeting meets like a Nazi propaganda rally, right? And those things wove together seamlessly. And in some ways, I began to see that flowering in 2015. And here we are. And so, yeah, it sucks that, it's crazy how many of us left over that 10 years and who made the journey out of it because we started to see that direction. And it's really wild thinking about people that that have stuck through it those 10 years and have gone even deeper. And that's like really sad to me when I think about that, but there is probably a lot more I could say about that, but that's really where that began. And, that ultimately led me out of the evangelical church completely. I spent a few years there trying to kind of do the change from within thing, but then I ultimately realized that I was still censoring myself and I could only evolve so much from within that system. In order to really have integrity, I had to come outside of that system, because the institutional pressure from within made it so that you could sort of chip away at the edges, but you could not. Yeah, I mean, if you were to actually, for example, fully endorse queer people, you would be kicked out. So you could sort of talk about vague justice and say we need to care more about the vulnerable. But as soon as you began to apply that to specific groups that the evangelicals wanted to demonize, they would kind of cut you out, which has ultimately happened. So when I left in 2020, and then I guess it was not until 2021, or no, actually probably 2022, that I first put out a video where I talked about why I believed Christians should embrace LGBT people. And that was like, I had believed that for some time, but it took me a while to get to the place to actually say it, because I knew that it would just cause a big backlash in the community that I had been a part of. They removed my sermons from their website and that sort of thing at that point. But once that Band-Aid was ripped, it was even easier to go ahead and be my full authentic self without worrying about sort of any consequences from that community, knowing that they had already kind of labeled me as a heretic. So yeah, in that 10 years, I've kind of it was a slow journey, and I'm not going to say that it's over, but I certainly am in a totally different place. Thank God, honestly.
Yeah. That's so interesting. You talk about people who, when you are the one on the journey, and then you look back at people who are still in the spaces where you used to be and you used to resonate, it is an interesting disconnect, right? Where you go, oh, I remember when we were in that space together and I agreed with you. And then I moved and you didn't move, and you still, are still there. And then sometimes those relationships get really weird. And, there are these topics, like you said, if you come out affirming of, the queer community, it is often a line in the sand. In fact, I wrote a blog post today just on like unpacking Romans 14, which I think is a really good argument for inclusion of the queer community. And I had someone that worked with me at the same church and responded to that on social media with just like a laughing emoji. Like, that's how she saw my whole post. And I just thought, like, we've gone such different, directions. Yeah. But you mentioned in the book, you had this line, and I don't have it in front of me, but you had this line about your dad, and you had just mentioned your parents, coming from this just traditional space. I'd love to hear a little bit, how have you navigated that with them? Because from what I can gather of what you say in the book, your dad is still way more fundamentalist on the hell issue. And you even said something to the effect of like, this has damaged your relationship at times. But it seems like you also have found a way to find a peace about that. How have you navigated that with them?
Yeah. So my dad is still an independent fundamental Baptist pastor. He's a full-time pastor, and he's the kind. There's two kinds of fundamentalists. Like I think evangelicals are fundamentalists, but they don't use that label. They don't label themselves that way. My dad is the kind of fundamentalist that is proud to be a fundamentalist. Like, he will tell you, he will introduce himself as a fundamentalist. Okay, and so that's like what I came from, and that's what he still is. So yeah, he believes in hell. And that can be hard. What I say in the book is that, well, I talk about the way that hell twists the very meaning of love and makes it hard to really accept someone where they're at. I mean, at the heart of loving someone is that you don't need to change them. You're not trying to make them more like you. You're loving them right where they are for who they are. And hell makes that almost impossible, because to love them is to, if you believe they're going to hell, then you can't accept where they are, because that's to kind of allow them to go down a path that would lead to their destruction. It's like not calling out while a truck is about to hit them. So you are compelled to change them, to save them. And actually you will feel guilty if you're not thinking about that all the time. If you in those spaces, I remember being told, how could you go to a family get together and just enjoy them and have a nice time as if, and not even speak up for the fact that like these people who are going to hell, like assuming that these people are unsaved, to not say anything at all, how little you must love them to not say anything at all. Like if you loved them, you would actually try to pull them out of the flames, right? And so my dad feels that. He feels that deeply. And so he has on various points pleaded with me, right? And it comes from a father's heart at times. Like he's gotten emotional before telling me like, I'm afraid for your soul. And, you know, the Bible says that a false teacher is worthy of a more severe punishment even than a regular heretic. Okay. So like he feels that. And what I say in the book is that when he is saying those things, as much as it hurts, I try to remind myself that that is my dad trying to love me. From within his paradigm, that's what love is going to look like. And unfortunately, nothing fucks up love like hell, because that's his version of love right now. But it's not, it's hard to receive that as love.
Yeah.
And so I do think that's, and I have said that to him. Well, not that part. I don't use the F word with my dad. But what I have said to him is I've acknowledged his pain, because it's always helpful. Listen, I think it's crazy that he believes that in a way. But on the other hand, I can empathize with the human emotion that he feels fear for the future of his son, right? Like I have sons, so I can like empathize with how that would feel. And so what I've said to him is I can see how hard that must be, that you have to carry that belief that your kids, not just me, but like all of his kids at this point, none of them have stayed that tried and true path that he's on, you know? And so that you have like, that you carry that belief that all your kids are going to hell. I bet that's so hard. And I'm really sorry that you believe something that like has to make you feel that way. Like, I mean, implicitly I'm saying like, it would be cool if you stopped believing it, but I don't have any expectation. I release control. That's the other advice I've had. And I try to urge my dad, because he feels like a failure. And he voiced that at times. He's been like, and I guess I must be just a lousy father because none of you have honored me in this way. And what I try to say to him is, no, like being a good parent is not about controlling how your kids turn out. It's about staying connected to them on the journey of life. You can't control somebody, who they become. You can't control me any more than I can control you, Dad. And thankfully though, like with my sons, I don't have to control them, because no matter how they come out, I don't have to believe that they're going to go to hell for eternity. So like that belief does make it very hard to release the control, but it's so essential because it's an illusion. You can't control. If anybody could have controlled how their kids could have come out, my dad would have done it, and he couldn't. So let go of that illusion.
Has he read your book?
No. Well, I mean, it's not out yet, but I actually have asked him not to read it. And so we'll see if again, I can't control him. If he wants to read it, he'll read it. But I basically said like, listen, Dad, if you're curious about like the arguments in the book, I can recommend other books that say similar things. I don't think you need to hear it from your son. I don't think you'd receive it anyway, you know?
Interesting.
Yeah. So I've asked him not to read it. I think it would just be hurtful. He's so rigid. Unless you're going to lean in. In any case, it's never helpful. I don't argue with my dad. I don't try to convince my dad. I just want to be my dad. I tell him, I was like, I just want you to show up. I don't want you to argue with me and convince me. I don't want you to evangelize us. When you come and visit, I want you to be a dad and a grandpa. I don't want you to be on mission. Okay. We're not your mission field. We want to be your family. And so I don't do that to him either. If he leans in and asks me a curious question, an honest question, then absolutely, like, let's go. Absolutely. But if somebody doesn't have that posture of curiosity where they're actually open to changing their mind, they're not going to change their mind. People don't change their minds unless they want to change their minds.
Right.
And they'll kind of let you know if that's where they're at. Otherwise, you can't force it. Yeah.
That's good stuff. All right. Let's talk about some quotes from the book. I'm going to read a quote that I loved, and you just get to react to it. And this is the fun of obviously people. The fun part of interviewing, an author of a book is as you read the book and you're like, ooh, I like that. I know I get to sit down with you and get you to elaborate on it. So that's the fun part.
Love it.
And then everybody gets
that is actually a really cool way to do an interview. Just like read a quote and be like,
ride.
Go. Yeah.
All right, here we go. You say this: judging from the way that many Christians talk about Jesus, you'd think Jesus did not need to live at all. He only needed to die. Which is a bit of like a mic drop, like, oh yeah, I had not thought about it, like you say that so succinctly. Why does the hell topic show us that the death is the only thing that we're banking on?
I hate to bring it up again, but we saw a great example of this just the other night at that Charlie Kirk memorial as well. There was an altar call, there was a gospel sermon, and I saw some Christians on Twitter celebrating that like whatever you think about the politics of this night, the gospel was preached, maybe on the biggest stage in American history. In fact, some people were speculating this was the largest altar call in American history. Gospels preached to millions of people. People got saved, right? And by that, what are they saying? They're saying that, and the message was really, it was a message about accepting the sacrifice of Jesus Christ for your sins so that basically, he's punished in your place because somebody has to be punished. This is a framework really where punishment is in charge, not love. So God's hands are tied. Somebody's got to be punished. Either you're going to be punished or Jesus. If you accept that sacrifice, Jesus is punished in your place. So you don't have to be punished in hell. You can go to heaven when you die. It's an afterlife-focused gospel. It's a belief-focused gospel where it's really just about assenting to this sacrifice that Jesus did, a transactional sacrifice. So it's a transactional gospel, and it's afterlife focused, and it's based on Jesus's death, not Jesus's life. None of this has anything to do with what Jesus taught, how Jesus lived, what Jesus's relationship with God was like, what Jesus's relationship with people was like, what Jesus said the purpose of his ministry was, how Jesus lived his life, how Jesus said we're supposed to live our lives. None of that. It's not about that at all. It's about securing your seat in the afterlife, and really about avoiding the punishment of a punishing God in hell. And it's related to the death of Jesus. So in the second half of my book, I realized that, and this is kind of what differentiates my book a little bit from other hell books. So some people are like, why do we need another book about like hell or universalism? You know, we have Rob Bell's amazing book, Love Wins, which came out about a decade ago. And really for me, where this book came from was that when I would talk about the fact that I didn't believe in hell, in other words, I believe hell is a metaphor. I don't think it's a real place that God is going to punish people in. When I would say that, people would say, well, if there's no hell, what's the point of Jesus? There's no hell. Why did Jesus live? Why did Jesus die? In other words, for most Christians, the point of Jesus is to save you from hell. And really by that, they're talking about the death of Jesus. So to bring it back to that quote, that's why for so many Christians, you can really, with the story of Jesus, skip from the virgin birth, which really just proves, oh, Jesus is God, to the atoning death. Even the resurrection almost doesn't play much of a part, because I think for a lot of Christians, the resurrection is just proof of Jesus is God. It doesn't actually accomplish anything salvifically, because the whole point is really that Jesus died in our place, was punished in our place. So it's a gospel of punishment. It's a gospel of the afterlife. It's a gospel of hell.
That's good. You say, if hell is real and God punishes people for failing to be in proper relationship with God, then connection to God is not about growing in God's love. It is about avoiding God's punishment. And if you ask any therapist or relationship expert, what do you call a relationship where you're not allowed to leave or the other person will punish you? They will tell you that's a toxic relationship. That is such a good quote, dude.
I know the girlies will appreciate that one, because I don't think I put it in there, but when I've said this, explain this out loud, I'm just like, when we hear about a relationship like that, we say, girl, run. Like, get out, girlfriend. He's not good for you. Okay.
Yeah.
He's gaslighting
and you want to say
you.
that to the Christians right now, like, run.
Yeah, no, it's true. So I have a section in the book where I talk about, that classic evangelical catchphrase, working on my relationship with God, right? That's what we say. It's a relationship, not a religion in evangelicalism. It's at the center of what it means to be a Christian is you're somebody who's in relationship with God. And what came to be pretty clear to me is that for most evangelicals, as evidenced by even just the other night, if people came into a relationship with God that night, it was based on hearing a story where they deserved to be punished, but Jesus was punished in their place so that Jesus endured hell on their behalf. They don't have to go to hell. Now, based on that information, would you like to be in a relationship with God? Knowing what are the consequences for not being in a relationship with God? Punishment. And so the foundation for this relationship is a threat. It's coercion. It is the threat of punishment. And for most of us, I say in the book that for many evangelicals, even though, they talk so much about their relationship with God, that relationship began with hell. And if you are in that relationship, and many Christians, obviously, I don't think that all of them are just constantly thinking about this threat. I think a lot of people put it on the back burner. They compartmentalize, they push it to the side. I know that they're not all obsessed with hell all the time. I know many Christians do, in fact, commune with God, do read their Bible and pray, do long for God to grow them in love and all that sort of thing. And that is what a relationship is about. A relationship is about you stay in the relationship for the positive value that you receive from the connection, the growth that you experience in that relationship, for the connection itself, not because you're afraid of the consequences of the punishment of disconnection. And so I do think that hell makes it impossible because the stakes are so high, that the punishment is so grand. It is the ultimate threat. And really a lot of this was given to us when we were children. We didn't even have a legitimate say in it. We didn't make a choice. It's not a choice when you tell a kid, hey, do you want to believe in this and go to heaven? Or do you want to reject this and go to hell for eternity? Like, that was the choice that we were given. And I'm sorry, but there was nothing spiritual about saying yes to that. Anybody can cave into a threat. That we're meant to be driven by love, and hell makes it impossible to be fueled by love and connection, which is what grows us up and actually makes us, I think, flourish. And it's what God wants for us. And so Jesus' commandment to love God with all our heart, mind, soul, and strength, I don't think is really impossible in the framework of a spirituality of hell.
When you talk about it as a toxic relationship, for me these days, not being in the evangelical space like I used to be, it feels so much easier to see that, where it's like, duh, But I recall, a day when I firmly did believe this view of hell, and it made sense to me because I was raised on it, and I was the little kid told these are your choices, and it's like, yeah, I don't want to burn, it's like I'll choose this, and then you get to a point where you start going, this is a little bit weird, and this is one of the reasons I love theology, and sometimes people be like, oh my gosh, let's talk about stuff that really matters, like the real world. And I think this is such a good reminder of the way you envision God matters immensely, because if this understanding of God that you likely started your relationship with, to your point, if that is healthy to you, then this whole thing is going to be so funky, and you're going to experience all these weirdness, all this weird parts of it. Whereas you can step back and go, yeah, you would never get into a dating relationship with someone who said, if you do not date me, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z to you. You would never start a relationship that way, right? That would be absurd. And yet we do it with God. And because it's common, we say it's normal.
And they do this gaslighting thing where the foundation, when you start the relationship, they tell you, no, you have to be in a relationship with God or you're going to hell. So you want to be in a relationship with God, right? And it's like, yes, okay, right? And then as you grow up, they say, now this is all about love. This is all about love. God is love, and you love God, right? Because God is love, and you just love God. And it's just, it's just all about love. You do love God, right? Because you know what happens if you don't, right? And so there's this, and maybe that's even unstated, but that is the premise for most people. And that is a kind of a gaslighting, because you're being told it's all about love. And if you even question that, oh, maybe actually it can't fully be all about love if I'm being threatened into this, then you're like, wait, you must not even be a real Christian. You don't love God, you just love God. And it's like, okay, but what about this whole hell thing? And it's like, oh no, don't worry about that. I'm not a Christian because of hell. They'll say that. And it's like, okay, so don't be a Christian. But then boom. So it is this weird dance. I think it just ruins it, and it makes it impure, and it's unnecessary. But you see how essential it is when you try to remove it. For many Christians, it is like this Jenga piece. And that's really why I felt like I needed to write this book, was because for a lot of Christians, you take out hell and the whole system falls apart. It doesn't make sense anymore. And they'll say, well, why even be a Christian? So they'll say on the one hand, I'm not a Christian because of hell. I just love God. Right. But then you say, well, I don't think there's a hell. And it's like, why even be a Christian if there's no hell?
Right. Then this whole thing doesn't matter. Yeah. No, that's so funny. And I suspect you get the same thing, but I regularly get, on social media when I'll post something, I'll regularly get, some very conservative Christian will stumble across it on the algorithm, and they'll threaten me with it's usually something to do with hell. And it's so funny to me because I can tell by the way they're wording it, they really think that like I'm going to start like getting nervous about their comment, like, oh, I didn't think this through, like you're right, you know. And it's like you don't, like, my favorite line I'll say to these people is like, your fear has no power here. Like you can leave this comment, but I'm just promising you it's doing nothing inside of here. Like I don't live in that fear anymore. But this whole evangelical machine is run on this inherent sense of fear that, if you logically point it out, they downplay it, but it is very real and present, because if you try to push the alternative, then the fear kicks in of like, well, then what am I left with? And where do we go from here?
Totally. I think you made a great point a few minutes ago too, when you were talking about how your view of God is so important because it shapes so much else. And I like to think about this because I still, even though I don't believe in hell, I still believe what you believe about God matters. But a lot of people, like when you think that matters, some people just assume that means, oh, because if you believe the wrong thing about God, then something bad's going to happen. You're going to be punished. I don't think what you believe about God matters, because if you die and you believe the wrong things about God, you know, you got the wrong answers on the God test. So now you go to hell, you're going to be punished in some way. God's going to punish you for being wrong about God. No, it matters because it shapes the kind of person you become. It shapes your priorities. If you believe God is love, but God also sends people to hell, then that means that your love can be punishing as well. That you think, I mean, Christians who say that they believe God is love and that they believe that they're loving their neighbors also think alligator Alcatraz is awesome. So like, how do you get there? And I do think that once you've invited the idea of a God who sends all of his enemies to hell, like a God who doesn't even take his own advice and love their enemies as themselves, you now shape love in the image of punishment. So it matters what kind of God you have.
You stole one of my quotes that I was going to use.
What's that?
So I'll get to it now. You say this. It's the part in the book where you say that if God's love includes punishment, then we start to believe our love can include punishment. And here's the way I was reading that the other day, and I shared this with our online community because go with me on a journey for a second. This is a little aside, but it ties in. So I had this realization the other day that when I get flack online from conservative people, oftentimes it will be a bizarre mix of like really sharp, biting insults mixed with really weird compliments. And I've just noticed this of like, man, this is like a whiplash. You're insulting me and then you're complimenting how good I am at what I do, but you hate what I do. But like, and so I just have noticed a number of posts that I got recently. And I was like, this is a really weird way. I think if you ask them, they would say they're showing me Christian love, right? They're rebuking me in love, which is why they would say, no, look, I said this nice thing about you. In between, you know, these horrible things I said to insult you. And I was processing that. And then I read that line of, if God's love includes punishment, our love can include punishment. And it was like this light bulb went off. And I was sharing with our online community, like, oh, that's what that is, that they are channeling their understanding of how God operates. And so if God operates in the sense of, I love you, and I love you so much that if you don't do exactly what I tell you to do, you're going to burn forever. And that's what true love looks like. Well, then, yeah, of course it looks like if I disagree with you, I get to say the nastiest thing possible as long as I tell you that I love you. You know what I mean? And then I'm showing you the same love, right, that God has shown me.
They think they're showing love because, again, like it's unloving not to say something if you're going down this dark path. Like they're speaking the truth in love. So the loving thing is to correct, is to rebuke it, because you're trying to rescue them from that punishment. And so, yeah, I mean, what I point out in the book is that, you know, hell twists the very meaning of love, and some of the most unloving things can be done. And you could call those things love when you're doing it in the name of saving somebody from hell. And the classic example that I see time and time again, and I've had at this point dozens of people kind of talk to me about their situation of parents cutting off their own children, not going to their weddings, not inviting them to holidays because they come out as gay. You know, and these parents will say, well, I can't come to your wedding because I love you and because I can't support your sin that's going to lead you to hell. That would be unloving, right? And so as a result, they do that. These sort of punitive mindsets of I'm going to cut you off because I have to control who you become. That is necessitated by their view of who God is and how God operates. And this does, I talk in the book a little bit about how this affected me as a parent, because I was raised being told that like parents should immediately discipline disobedience. Like disobedience has to have immediate consequences. And really by consequences, we meant punishment, not natural consequences. Spankings for me. And this idea that if you weren't doing that, that wasn't loving, because you were allowing these kids to become rebellious and move forward in their sin, which is an unloving thing because it causes them to, you know, go further into sin towards hell. So that's unloving. The loving thing is to bring that discipline or that punishment, really. And so even though once I began to deconstruct the idea of a punishing God, ripping that punishing out of my parenting was really difficult because I actually felt unloving when I wouldn't punish my kids. But I felt like there was something, maybe I'm being a bad father, because a good father would be a disciplinarian right now and wouldn't tolerate that sort of bad behavior, that rebellious behavior, that sin or whatever. And even though I had kind of begun to deconstruct that, there was still something in me that believed that punishment was righteous. And I don't, it doesn't work. I mean, the psychologists will tell us it doesn't work. Child development experts tell us it doesn't work, that actually kids need connection, not punishment. Natural consequences, yes, but arbitrary punishments, and especially corporal punishment, absolutely not. It doesn't do anything good for our kids. And yet I would feel like I was doing something bad for not punishing. That is, again, this mindset that many of us were discipled with, that's what true love looks like.
Were you raised with all the Dobson stuff?
So yes and no. It was a different world. It was adjacent. So I was fundamentalist, but there's different brands of fundamental Baptists, and so we were adjacent to the Dobson. We were a Bob Jones family, which was just a different world of fundamentalism. So similar stuff for sure, but not directly Dobson.
Man, I'll tell you what. After he passed away recently, I have been so shocked by the amount of damage that one man and his ideas have done to an entire generation of people. Yeah. And I mean, there was a week where all I was doing was just talking online and responding to people and just making space for people to share their pain. And I had like this much of it, you know, compared to these stories that people were sharing. And I mean, it was just like, it was the heaviest week. And then I'm watching, you know, on another hand, like these Christians honor him and celebrate him, you know, and I'm like, I'm getting flooded with people mourning like the loss of their innocence and their childhood. And now talking about the PTSD they have as an adult. And again, you realize all of this stuff, it affects you as a parent. It affects the way you grew up. It affects the way you think of your childhood. I mean, like, we're talking generational trauma is on the line with some of these bad theologies.
Totally, man. Yeah, I in my book I referenced Dr. Becky Kennedy, who wrote a book called Good Inside, and I think she's the antidote to Dobson in many ways. So if you were raised on Dobson stuff, I think you should read Dr. Becky's book, Good Inside, which I found really, really healing. It's not technically a theology book, but I do actually, I drew a lot from it, and it healed some stuff in me for sure. Because ultimately to parent that way, the way that she's recommending, which by the way is data driven. So like what she's recommending is based on what leads to good outcomes for kids, what neuroscience, what child development experts say is good for kids' brains. You parent better. You parent in a way that serves yourself and your kids better when you have the perspective that your kid is good inside. And I was raised believing that I was wicked from birth, that I was born worthy of going to hell. And actually, it really does affect how you view someone, how you relate to someone in relationship, whether you believe that that person is fundamentally worthy of love, deserving of love, or fundamentally deserving of punishment. Yeah. And I was taught that from birth, I was fundamentally, before God and my parents, I was fundamentally wicked and deserving of punishment. I couldn't listen to my heart, my intuition. I was desperately wicked. And that affects how you see yourself and other people. And it's not biblical. It's not true. And it doesn't lead to good outcomes mentally for children, for people, for human beings. And so, and that is rooted in hell doctrine for sure.
Well, so much of Christianity is based on shame, is based on these theologies that, you know, the way I say it is, you're a piece of shit, but good news, Jesus can fix you. You know, and like, that's the way we present it. Well, it's like, well, if your starting point is I'm a piece of shit, then that's where my self-esteem is going to stem from. Right. Which is why you see so many people struggle with things. And it's like, I love just you know, I've not read that book, but starting with the premise that you're good inside is a fundamentally different starting point than I wasn't raised with that. You know, I was raised in the original sin camp.
Yeah. I do think it matters whether, yeah, that is the classic gospel that we grew up with, was God loves you in spite of who you are, because you're actually not worthy. You're undeserving of God's love. That's mercy. The love that God shows you is grace, because it's totally undeserved. You do not deserve to be loved. And that's fucked up, actually. And that does affect how you view everyone. I believe that every single person is worthy of love, is worthy of care and compassion. They're deserving of that, not in spite of who they are, but because of who they are as image bearers of God. And that's just, it is a very different starting point. And that's the good news, by the way. And that's what grace is that unmerited favor doesn't mean that despite how absolutely terrible and unworthy and wretched you are, we love you anyway. That's not grace. Grace is everybody can get in on this. It's not deserved, because just innately who you are, you're worthy of it. You don't have to work for it. You don't have to earn it. It is deserved. That's the message of grace. And that's every single person as an image bearer of God is worthy of love just by nature of being born a human being in God's image. And I was told the exact opposite of that just really by virtue of being born a human being, you were worthy of hell because you made that unfortunate choice of being born a human being.
Well, and so many of the things that are said on you know, church stages by worship leaders setting up, you know, moments and all this is that language, you know, of, you know, God, you chose to love us even when we don't deserve your love. And it's like, now I hear that and I go, why don't we deserve God's love? Like, I would love to sit down with the worship leader in that moment and go, help me understand why you don't think I'm worthy to deserve the love of God. And, you know, I think they would go, well, I don't mean it like that. You know, they would try to like move around it, but like, that's the language that is used.
Absolutely. So common. Yeah. You love us even when we don't deserve it. How about, wouldn't it be better to say that like your love, it's always present beyond deserving. We're always worthy of love, even when we mess up. Of course we're fallible. Nobody's saying we're perfect, right? We're fallible, frail, vulnerable, capable of immense evil and making horrible mistakes, and also just vulnerable to circumstances. You know, we are desperately like fragile creatures and we need love, and we also are worthy of love, and we should care for one another and create the kind of world that values people the way that God values people. That's the kingdom of God.
Amen. I like it. All right. You say the spirituality of hell excludes and others people. Jesus includes the other and shows us that we are all more similar than we thought. We are connected, whether we are aware of it or not. Refusing to see this, that is hell. I love the way you talk. One of my friends, Andrew DeCourt, has this phrase. He always talks about othering, that we are othering people. And I got that parallel here of hell is really an othering type theology. And when you buy into it, you ironically enter into a place of hell where there are, you know, us and them, and there are lines to be drawn, and am I in and am I out? And that is hell. How do we get beyond that? How do you see removing the other and a better way of thinking about this?
Yeah, I think hell theology, like you said, it actually heightens that tendency, which I don't need God. I don't need the Holy Spirit to help me other people. I do that just fine on my own. Damning people, putting people into categories, saying I'm in and you're out, and I'm good and you're bad. I don't need, that's the flesh. That's what the flesh does. I think that is, those are tribal instincts. I think that Jesus was calling us beyond. I think the quote that you mentioned, I'm trying to remember where that was in the book, but I think I might've been referencing the parable of the prodigal son in that section, which I use a couple times in the book. And I think that the picture of the older brother being outside of the party that God, the Father, is throwing, that is, I think, a powerful picture of what hell actually is. It's the party's for everybody. The invitation is always open, and anybody can get in on this. But when you refuse to join in based on that scope of the welcome, because Jesus was always welcoming people. That was kind of his whole thing. They grumbled about Jesus and said, this man welcomes sinners and eats with them. And that's what he did. He ate with the wrong kind of people. He was always throwing parties for people, and everyone was always invited. And he told stories. He tells also, there's a parable of the banquet where the wedding invitation goes out and the rich people don't show up. So the wedding host says, bring in the poor, the blind, the lame, the outcasts, go to the highways and the byways, let all those people come in. And the rich people who didn't want to come, they can be cast out. We keep ourselves out of the party, but the welcome is expansive. And now evangelicals will hear that expansive welcome and they'll just say, well, yeah, everybody has the opportunity to receive the gospel. But no, this isn't about assenting to a particular dogma and checking the box that, I prayed a particular prayer or I responded to an altar call. This is receiving the reality of our belovedness in God, which is true about everyone all the time. But when we refuse to embrace one another in our humanness, when we instead say, you are wicked, I am not, I'm going to heaven, you're going to hell, I believe the right thing, you believe the wrong thing, you have to be converted to believe like me or you're fucked. When we are doing that, we are in a mindset not of connection, not of belovedness, but in separation and superiority. That's the same mindset that the older brother had who didn't want to enter the party. We put ourselves in a kind of a psychological hell often. That's one way to think of it anyway. I'm trying to remember the other thing I was going to say in response to that quote, but I guess that's good for now. End rant.
Okay, you talk about this. We'll get a little technical for a second. You talk about having a season where you believed the annihilationism view of hell on your way to where you are. I did too. That was my stepping stone too. So here's the idea I had after I read that. Should we be encouraging annihilationism as a gateway drug for what we really want people to experience? What do you think?
I mean, I think here's why I needed that. I'll tell you why that was necessary for me. Because in evangelicalism, there needs to be an in-group and an out-group. And so even though I was trying to soften it, and by the way, annihilationism is still actually not only a softer view than eternal conscious torment, it is actually also more biblical. Here's why. So it was not hard to be an annihilationist. Biblically, most of the language about judgment is destruction language, not torment language. There is very little.
Explain annihilationism real quick in case someone doesn't understand what we're talking about.
So there are three historic Christian positions on hell. All three of them are found early on in Christian history. Eternal conscious torment, which is kind of the majority traditional position that you are going to consciously suffer in hell forever if you're an unbeliever. The second position is annihilationism, which means that unbelievers are put out of existence. They are destroyed. And then the third position is universalism, that God will ultimately reconcile all creation to God. All three of those positions are early in Christian history. Eternal conscious torment is the dominant evangelical position and really the majority position throughout Christianity. I think there's all kinds of reasons for that. The Bible is not really one of them. I think control mechanisms, fear, shame, all of those are good reasons. Annihilation actually is a very biblical position because there are a lot of passages that point to destruction language. The destruction of the wicked is the common theme, especially in the Old Testament, but also in the New Testament. And fire imagery, when fire imagery is used, fire consumes. Fire is not an agent of torture. Fire is typically an agent of either consumption or refinement. So annihilation wasn't hard to get to. And of course, the idea of God keeping people in existence just to torture them, like Jonathan Edwards talks about, like the spider dangling over the flame and just like holding him just there to suffer. Like it's actually a sadistic image of God. And I hated it. And it drove me. It was really something that I was troubled with. And so I did a lot of research, and I ultimately came to the annihilationist position due to the destruction language. And then also because ultimately universalism, even though it was very appealing to me, the system that I was in, we were evangelicals, which meant we had to do evangelism, which meant we were supposed to be converting people, which meant we were trying to save people from what exactly? From hell. There had to be a punishment. The whole system that we had demanded a punishment. And so I tell the story in my book where I tell my lead pastor that I became an annihilationist. And I was nervous to do this because I knew that position was not actually, even that is seen as a liberal position for many evangelicals, even though it's pretty severe. And he was like, okay, so you don't believe that, unbelievers are going to be, tortured forever in hell. And I was like, no. And he's like, okay, but you think something bad is going to happen to them, right? And I was like, yeah, totally, like something bad. And I realized, though, as I reflect on that moment, that their system demands that there be a something bad. There has to be a punishment, and there has to be a them. There has to be an out group. There has to be those are the people out there, and we are the safe ones in here. And our safety is really achieved and predicated on their outsideness, right, and their otherness. And that also gives us a mission. It gives us something to do. Our job is to convert them. And it also means that we are the ones with the keys to heaven and hell. We're the ones who know. We have that insider knowledge, and we're going to heaven. And so it puts us in this category. All of that is essential to the evangelical spirituality. Just briefly, because I did mention that destruction language is very prevalent. Or maybe, I don't know, what's your next question? Maybe we're going there. Are we going to talk about other
my next question's a total curveball, so no, go where you're going to go.
Well, let me just say, like, what I do with that now is I think that the destruction language in the Bible is, for the most part, apocalyptic hyperbole. And typically, especially in the Old Testament, when the wicked are talked of being destroyed, it's not talking about what happens to them in the afterlife. It's talking about the consequences in this life. So, for example, Gehenna, which is the word that Jesus uses for hell, the valley of Hinnom, he actually borrows this from Jeremiah. And when Jeremiah talked about Gehenna, he said that the valley of Hinnom, Gehenna, would become a valley of slaughter, not because God was going to throw a bunch of people into hell in the afterlife, but because the Babylonians were going to come and destroy Jerusalem and destroy the temple and kill a bunch of people in this life because they failed to take care of the vulnerable, the poor, the needy, the widow, the outcast, the orphan. And he said, because you haven't lived the ways that God is calling you to live, this is the natural consequence. So I see that destruction language typically through the Bible. It's pointed at civilizations and empires that refuse to live out God's ways of love. And the idea is that those chickens will always come home to roost, that when you sow violence, you will reap violence, not in the afterlife, but in this world. I believe that the Bible is telling a very this worldly message.
I love it. Okay, here's my curveball. I love this quote. I read this and I was like, oh, I gotta ask you this. You say, I recently began attending an ecstatic dance group in Raleigh. And you tell one of the most amazing stories that I was doing my best to picture what this looked like. But you talk about this experience as like this beautiful picture of church, of community and belovedness. I mean, it's beautiful, but I mean, dude, it's wild. Like, I want to hear more. Like, are you regularly going to this? What's the deal?
I haven't gone as often as I want because it's on Thursday nights and I have my kids on Thursday nights. It's one of my custodial nights. So I've gone on various times when I, for some reason, am free that night. And so I've probably gone 4 or so times. And I still feel a little awkward when I go. It's a different sort of experience for me, but I do find it very powerful. And also it's a very tight knit community and people are like being changed by that community. I point out in the book, I'm talking about what can our communities be? What can spiritual community be? Because I don't think it's dogma that changes people. I don't think it's believing the right things that changes people. I went and you dance for 90 minutes. Some different person in the community works on a set every time. And so they share their heart behind the set. They'll be like, here were my intentions for this set. Here were some things that I would hope that we would feel and experience in this set. That's amazing. You laugh, bro, but that's what music does. Like, that's amazing. So fucking real, dude.
Oh, it's so
it was
cool.
rich. Then they have a little talk before you start dancing. They talk about a spirit of consent because they want it to feel like safe and welcoming. And obviously you can dance with people, but it has to nobody should feel like they have to dance with somebody that they don't want to dance with, And then the music plays and you just do whatever you want. Some people are laying on the floor. Some people are like really good dancers. Other people are like really awkward, like me. And you just feel it. And it is an embodied experience. And I found that was really healing to me because I was not given a very good relationship with my body, with my physicality. Spirituality was often, it didn't have much to do with being present in my body and being in the present moment. And so I've found that really rich. And then after the dance is done, you sit in a circle and you just share, and you can leave. You don't have to stay for this part, but a lot of people do. You just share like, hey, how was that for you? You know? And I was shocked the first time I went, how many people shared like spiritual revelations that they had while they were dancing. There was no preaching. There was no sermon. Nobody gave them like, here's the 10 commandments that you have to obey. But some people were like, as I was dancing, I had been feeling a lot of resentment towards my mom lately. And I was able to let that go. I just was able to forgive her. But we didn't preach a sermon on forgiveness. But you were just being present in a loving community. Love is what changes us. It's so funny. We know this. There's a Bible verse that talks about God's kindness leading us to repentance. And we know that it's grace that changes us. Like evangelicals will preach that. And yet they think they need the threat of punishment to change people. They think they need dogmas to change people. It's actually love that changes people. It's unconditional acceptance that changes people. And this a community without dogma can still have love. There was one, there was a non-binary young person in the group, and I'll never forget. They said in the group as we went around sharing, they said, and they looked like they're in their mid-20s, and they said, 15-year-old me wasn't even sure that I'd be alive right now, much less this happy. And so I'm just so thankful to you guys for being in this community with me. And I was just like, wow, what am I a part of right now? Like, this is cool.
It's so cool.
So yeah, a very rich thing to just be reminded as well of how God is not confined to. Evangelicals will tell you that God's not confined to the four walls of the church, but they kind of act like God is, right? Because they think that ultimately God comes through their dogma and their answers, but God is for everybody, baby. And I have tasted God in some very non-Christian environments. And so I'm excited that story stood out to you. I found that to be one of the most spiritual places that I've been to.
Dude, 90 minutes sounds like a long time to be dancing.
It goes fast. No, it goes fast.
Does it
you
really?
You can go leave and take a break. Some people take a break. Some people go to the bathroom. There's people chatting in the hallway and they'll come back in and out. I got sweaty. I was getting into it, man.
I got sweaty.
It's great. I highly recommend. This is a popular thing. Most communities, most larger cities have one. You can just Google ecstatic dance in my community. And there's probably a group of like 20 of the most incredible people. And they're all going to have good politics, by the way. These are typically not going to be bad. These are going to be good people that you're going to want to hang out with and go dance with them, man.
That's amazing. I love it. All right, we're going to transition some questions that I like to ask each of our guests, and we get to compare your answers to everybody else, and that's fun. So we'll do a wine question for you.
Oh,
I know you say you're more of a beer guy. Yeah, he's going around too.
I'm enjoying this bottle. I'm having a great time. I'm just going for it. I got this whole bottle just for this podcast. I wanted to be drunk by the end of it. We'll just see how that pans out.
Cheers to you, my man. Cheers. I love it. Okay, so you're more of a beer guy. We get that, but you've obviously are willing to drink wine. I imagine you've had wine. If I were to say to you, Brian, what's the best glass of wine you've ever had in your life? Is there any memory that comes to your mind that you were with certain people, you were at a certain place, it was a certain bottle? Is there anything that you have that you go, you know what? That is probably the highlight for me of like that. That was the best I've ever had.
So it's kind of a random one, but yeah, when I was an evangelical pastor, that lead pastor that I mentioned, actually a sweet guy. Like all these people, I want to say this just real quick. I disagree with my evangelical friends on a lot of things, but like none of this is personal. Like I wish that they weren't so hurt by my moving away, because none of it had to do with like, I actually hate you guys now. That's not what it is. Right. So anyway, this guy, the lead pastor, his name was Donnie. He was actually a big foodie, and a lot of pastors are actually really into food and wine. So he was a big foodie, big wino. And we were actually at a conference in Cape Town, South Africa. And he took the whole team out to like a nice steakhouse after the conference, and he bought some nice wines. I didn't know shit about shit. I just let him get the thing. And I just had this picture of him like swirling his wine around in the glass and like smelling it, and me just being like listening to what he was saying about the notes and not really knowing anything about it. But like, it was really incredible. So people contain multitudes, man. A lot of these evangelical pastors like love the finer things for some reason. I don't know what that is.
I love it. That's a great answer. All right. Which member of church history would you trust to pick out a bottle of wine for you? And who would you not trust and why?
It feels like Bonhoeffer seemed to be kind of a classy little bitch. I bet he could pick out a good bottle of wine. Whereas I feel like Martin Luther was a big beer guy. He was kind of like more of a burly. I bet he didn't really give a shit about it. So I'll go Bonhoeffer. I don't know if he was into wine or not, but he always seemed very kind of like precious about things. So
okay,
just
so
like the vibe he gave off.
Who's picking it for you? Who do you not ask to pick a bottle for you?
Yeah, I think Martin Luther. Yeah, Martin Luther. I mean, he's like, I feel like he was like kind of, there was like toxic masculinity vibes about him or something. Like he was more of a beer guy, and I think he was probably looked down on wine drinkers. I don't know.
Especially late in life, Martin Luther. You want to stay away from that guy.
I don't know historically his posture towards wine, but.
Oh, that's funny. I like it. Okay, what is something you used to believe that it turned out later you were wrong about?
Well, I mean, my whole book is about my journey with hell. And so that was definitely something that I believed and I agreed with for a long time. I never liked believing it. It wasn't like I chose that belief and was like, I really want to believe in hell because I think this is important. I thought I had to believe in it. And similar with LGBT issues, I was not affirming because I thought I was told I grew up in fundamentalism. I was brought up with a disgust reflex with LGBT issues. My parents said it was gross. If there was like a man kissing another man, my parents would say, ew, and say this is gross. And so I was taught that this was gross. And I've seen now with my sons that's totally socialized. You don't naturally think it's gross because my kids have never been brought up with that position at all. Like I was able to introduce them to married gay friends very early on. And so they just think it's normal, but that was a way that I was raised. And even that, I never, once I started to know more about these as people, gay people as people, I didn't want to believe it, but I thought I had to believe it. So getting free from that, both of those are two big ones for sure.
That's great. What do you see as the main issues facing Christianity in America today?
Oh my God. Well, Christian nationalism is obviously a big one. I hate to make it all about my book, but I do think that hell is a huge control tactic used, not just in evangelical Christianity, but by Christian nationalists. Absolutely. It is one of the biggest ones to break from, and it kind of justifies everything else. It is a trump card. Whenever like the argument starts to fall apart or, you're like unloving in this way, it's boom, hell. And that is the trump card. It trumps everything else. And it keeps them from being more self-reflective about the harm of their policies on earth because they're so worried about saving people for heaven. And so as a result, like I said, how can this gospel message at the Charlie Kirk rally where they had an altar call and all these people got saved, and then it segues directly into a Nazi rally where Stephen Miller is talking about doing violence on their political enemies? So it's like, how is that side by side? Simple. Empire loves afterlife-focused religion. Empire will make this deal every single time. You, the church, you take care of their souls, we're going to control their bodies.
Yeah, let us handle the rest.
Yeah, absolutely. Nobody loves heaven and hell focused religion more than corrupt politicians and billionaires. Billionaires are like, oh yeah, no, heaven and hell, very, very important. You guys stay focused on that. That's your thing. I'm going to go ahead and just rule over the planet and exploit it for, extract wealth. And so, yeah, they love it. And we're seeing that play out. So that's not the only issue for sure. But I would be curious. I don't think the whole thing couldn't stand up without it. I think that is what keeps it being an opiate. Marx called religion an opiate of the people. And I think that really that applies directly to afterlife focused religion. I think that if spirituality is not about this world, this life, the kind of societies we're creating, who humanity is becoming, the future of our planet, if it's not about that, if it's about where do we go when we die, yeah, it's an opiate. Absolutely.
Well, and you kind of tease this, but it's a fun thought experiment and something that truly maybe can give someone hope today. But imagine if we could get more and more people free from the shackles of this hell theology. Like, what would be the byproducts of that? You know what I mean? How many other bad things would unravel because they're connected to this one caboose, if you will?
Yeah. I often find that I think when people are deconstructing, this issue comes up pretty big time because, as I point out in my book, when you start pulling the thread of hell, it starts to unravel the whole sweater of Christianity.
Yeah.
Like once you start pulling it, you're like, oh, wait, but if there's no hell, then why did Jesus die? And what's the atonement? And, oh, wait, what's the point of being a Christian? And didn't I become a Christian to not go to hell? And so all of a sudden it's like, what's the point of any of this? You start to unravel the whole thing. Unless you discover a spirituality from within Christianity that resonates with you. And for me, that comes down to Jesus. So it's all about going back to Jesus. And so one of the reasons I wrote this book, and listen, I don't care where you land. Like people on their deconstruction journeys can deconstruct however they want. It's not important for me that people stay Christian. I don't care how you label yourself. That doesn't matter. I don't think God is going to punish you if you say, hey, actually, I'm not a Christian anymore. Many of my best friends are atheists. That being said, I think many people do reject Christianity altogether because it is an afterlife focused religion. And there are, I do love to point to not only Jesus himself and the spirituality of Jesus himself, which I don't believe was about that, but also throughout Christian history, that has not been what it has been about for many Christians. And so there's a long tradition now of liberation theology and mystical theology that is about discovering our belovedness in God, not punishment, and also about liberation for the oppressed. And so that's what I try to point to in my book. Not, again, to control people's outcome and make sure that they don't reject Christianity and stay Christian, but because I want people to know that if you want to hold on to Jesus, you can, and it's not about heaven and hell. The people that think that it's all about heaven and hell aren't even listening to the message of Jesus. They're using Jesus as a transactional totem to basically get the afterlife that they want. It's not about modeling themselves after the priorities of the Jesus. And we're following the living Christ in the here and now. And so for me, I do want people to know that there can be a spirituality for them that might still work for them. And again, not telling them what to do, but presenting this as like, hey, this is a spirituality that is still working for me from within Christianity, from within the Christian tradition. I don't have to, I grew up on Jesus, and I've had a lot of problems with Christianity and the church through the years, but none of those really were because of who Jesus was and what Jesus was saying. And so I love that I haven't had to throw him out. If anything, I actually feel like I'm following Jesus more closely than ever.
Yeah, totally. What's something that's blowing your mind right now that you're learning?
Man, I don't have time for learning right now. My book's about to come out. I'm just going on podcast talking like this. That's a good question. Great. What is blowing my mind right now? I just finished my MDiv. And so I've been in a long process of learning. And I'm done now with seminary as of about a month ago. And what am I learning? Man, that's a great question. People should always be learning. I'm all about learning. I feel like I've learned so much in the past few years. I feel like in many ways I'm a different person than I was a few years ago because I've learned so much. I think I'm learning to listen. I'm learning more to listen. We're both, I guess I'm assuming that you're straight, but I think we're both straight white guys. Yeah. And yeah, so there you go. We're both straight white guys, which means
although someone accused me of being in a lavender marriage today on my wife's social media, so I'm not sure what to do with that.
I don't think I want to be friends with a straight white guy who doesn't occasionally get called gay. I don't think.
Well, then we can be friends.
If the manosphere is not coming for you at any level.
My wife showed me that, and I didn't even know what that meant. I was like, she's looking at me, and I'm like, what's a lavender marriage? And she's like, they're saying you're gay. And I was like, oh, like, okay.
That's amazing. Basically, well, didn't you know that emotional connection is gay? And I've been called gay, well, for all kinds of things. Yeah, I mean, Andrew Tate says that liking women is gay. So,
Okay. I don't
don't
normally go off of things he says.
For sure. I do think that the sort of aggressive masculine posture, they love to label healthy. Healthy masculinity is not being like as masculine as possible. I think it's embracing the wholeness of who you are, who you're created to be,
totally.
and what's inside of you. And we all contain aspects and characteristics that some people might label feminine. And if we're rejecting those parts of ourselves, then we are in fact rejecting parts of ourself in order to appear more masculine, which is actually making us less ourselves. And so maybe that's what I'm learning, is learning to be my true self and embrace parts of myself that I was told I should reject in some way. But what I was saying before is I've been learning to listen. As a straight white guy, I can't change who I am and who I've been born to be, and even the privilege that I've experienced. And in evangelicalism and becoming an evangelical pastor, I'm even able to see that I was given platforms that weren't accessible to other people. I was in a complementarian church where women couldn't even have access to that particular area of leadership. Queer people certainly couldn't have access to it. Although racial minorities could technically have access to it, they typically only could if they performed whiteness in a particular way, right? And so I'm able to see that much more clearly now than I was before. And I want to be somebody that's learning from and listening to the people that were excluded from the systems that elevated me previously. I think that's like where my growth can come from now. And so I try to befriend those people and listen to them and try to be in mutual relationships with them where I'm not, I'm not entering those to to dehumanize in any particular way, but actually be friends with. So some of my best friends now are queer people. And I'm planning a conference right now called the Ember Gathering with my friend Tamise Spencer Helms, who's a Black, queer, non-binary, female presenting person. And just being in the planning room with them and just learning from the way that they see the world, which is so different than the way that I was socialized to see the world, but so important to me. And so I think that's really, I think where I'm learning the most is in relationships that I wasn't in those kind of relationships when I was an evangelical pastor, and then also learning to see new parts of myself as well that were previously suppressed. And so that's been a fun journey.
Nice. Love it. I can imagine where you go with this, but what's a problem you're trying to solve?
Where do we begin? There's
a few of them out there.
There's a lot I could say, but the one that I'll just say is one of my hopes for my book, I think it would be really cool if evangelical Christianity as a whole was not so focused on the afterlife, and that they began to see social justice in this life, equality in this life. It's so funny, like Charlie Kirk, like one of his big wars was against diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI. And the right, they hate DEI. In many ways, that's like a summary of like the gospel according to Jesus. Like Jesus went to the people that did not have access to power, that were excluded, that were not experiencing equity, that were not being included, and he went to those diverse people and he included them, and he ate meals with them, and he established a new kind of community from the margins. That's literally what Jesus did. And so the very thing that like is the essence of the gospel is ignored completely for the favor of this afterlife focused religion of conforming to a particular dominant theology. And so, I do think that helping Christians see that hell doesn't need to be central to their spirituality, and that also when Jesus was talking about hell, when he used the word Gehenna, he was not speaking of the afterlife. He was talking about real world consequences. I think if I could get people to believe that, that'd be really, really cool. I would love, if I was able to move the needle even a little bit on that issue, I think, it's probably like a life well lived, I guess.
Nice. What's something you're excited about right now?
Bro, my book comes out next Tuesday. When does this episode drop? I forget.
So we're going to post this tomorrow, which will be
nice.
September 24th.
Okay. So yeah, that means 6 days from when you're listening to this. If you're listening to it on the 24th, my book comes out. I'm really excited. Like I said, I'm pretty stressed. I told you that before the episode started. I'm just trying to like push it as much as possible without being annoying about it. And so, but I'm excited to see people reading it, excited to hear what's hitting people. Like this has even been really fun for me hearing the quotes that jumped out to you. Like no author loves anything more than like hearing that, oh, I wrote something that jumped out to you, you know, like that's just so fun. And so I'm excited for more of that. In terms of like the global space and the world as it is, like the timeline that we're a part of, there's not much exciting. It's all pretty bleak, if I'm honest.
Our corner of the multiverse. Is there anything else you want to add that we cannot close out this interview if you don't get this in? Is anything else you're like, wait, let me just say this? I don't want to miss anything.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I got to talk about a lot of the themes from my book. I think what I would say is, I'm assuming most of your listeners are probably pretty progressive in their faith at this point, and they're probably not stressed out over the like hell right now, which is cool. And I guess what I would say is I think I was not fully aware, well, until I began to really explore it, how much my very view of who God was, who I was, and who other people were, what it meant to be a Christian, what it meant to live in the world, what my mission was, all of that really was twisted by, affected by my belief that unless people believe these right Christian doctrines, they were going to go to hell. And that binary thinking that there were two destinations, and that you were going to go to heaven or hell, that really did affect all of those things. And I think as I unwove that, this book that I wrote is not just about untangling the doctrine of hell, but I talk a lot about the spirituality of hell. In other words, how this caused me to view God, myself, and other people. And I think a lot of us have to do that excavation work. And it's not, I think some of us have just kind of moved on and say, okay, I don't want to think about that anymore. I don't want to believe that anymore. And I'm moving on with my life. But the reality is that many of us believed that for a long time. Many of us agreed with that belief. You know, there's a belief is something, it's like a thought that you just agreed with. So like you heard, hey, if you die today without believing in Jesus, and people who don't believe in Jesus, they're going to hell. Many of us heard that and we agreed with it for many, many years. And that bore deep grooves in our souls and shaped our very spirituality. And I do think that we need to unfuck our spirituality a little bit. So the book is called Hellbent because I think a lot of us have been bent by this afterlife disposition, this hell punishment disposition. And I think that's just has nothing to do with what Jesus was calling us to. And so I am hopeful that some people will they'll be a little triggered and they're going to revisit some childhood memories maybe they haven't thought about in a while. But hopefully on the other side of that, it draws them into a richer and fuller spirituality.
That's so good. Okay, so if someone is resonating with this, they're like, I love this, I need more. How do they find you online? How do they get a copy of this book?
I'm on mostly Instagram, B.E. Recker, R-E-C-K-E-R, B.E. Recker I almost give my email address, but B.E. Recker is my Instagram, at B.E. Recker, not at gmail.com, although that is also an email address. That's where I mostly live. I post on there. I also write on Substack, Beloved with Brian Recker, where I post different meditations and some reflections on current events and that sort of thing. And the book should be everywhere books are sold. You know, I recommend getting it at a local bookstore is always best. And you can contact your local bookstore and ask them to order it, which is like the coolest thing you could possibly do for me. Like if you really wanted to just absolutely blow me away, it's like call your local bookstore and order it through them. So make sure that they stock it and you order it from a local business. But you know, if money's tight, order it from your library. But you know, you can put it on hold at your library, and that's also really cool. Make sure that it makes sure that your library orders a copy. It's also, of course, on Amazon, and it's also on audio and digital. I did record the audio myself, which I'm pretty excited about. I got pretty fired up a few times, so I think it'll be a pretty good audio experience. I prefer hardcover because or hard copy because I like to underline and that sort of thing. But if you like audio, it should be. I think it'll be a good audio. I think I killed it. You know, sometimes you listen to an audiobook and you're like they didn't do a good job here. You know, like they should have hired somebody. But I feel like I did a good job. So you let me know if I did a good job.
We'll be the judge of that, sir. Okay,
Absolutely.
We'll let the people.
How did you like the book? You read the book. What'd you think?
I thought so. here's what's funny. I read Love Wins when it came out, and I wasn't in the universal camp at that point, and I wasn't convinced by it. And I'm a Rob Bell fan. I've had him on the podcast. No knock on Rob. I just didn't think that book was that compelling. Then I read Brad Jerzak's book, Her Gates Will Never Be Shut, and that was kind of like, all right, that nudged me. Then I read David Bentley Hart's book, That All Shall Be Saved, and that was like, that tipped me over the edge, where then I'm like, I'm full on in this camp. So now I start from this place, right? So it's like, it's hard to imagine when you've made the journey. It's hard to like, how would this book have hit me, if I was over there? I think you lay it out so compellingly, so practically, right? Where it's not just, hey, because there are other books that I would say are more theological unpacking of the words and the original language. And that's not really, you touch on that's not your focus. You get into why this matters.
I didn't want to leave people in the weeds. I did want to get the bigger
those books
picture
exist.
a little bit.
Yeah, right. And those exist. And you, I think, put yourself in a space that I haven't read a book on hell like this. And I think it's needed, and it's incredibly practical. And it's I would say you're the so what book of like, why does this matter? So what? Well, I'm going to show you why this matters, right? And then it's like so compelling when you read it of like, oh my gosh, like I don't want to live in this world, with this theology and the way this would cause me to treat people and treat myself and understand God. And that's how I thought that's where your book shines.
That's really cool. I that's the book I wanted to write. So that's true. Those books, I love all those books. I love David Bentley Hart's writing, but like, first of all, that man is inscrutable. And second of all,
he's the most brilliant Christian alive. Let's just agree on that.
He's great. I'll agree with that. I love him. Yeah. And I love that book. And I do also even pull from his argument a little bit in I have one chapter where I argue for universalism, and I pull from David Bentley Hart's argument a little bit. And I also pull from Brad Jerzak's book. I use that picture of the gates not being shut at the end of that chapter, because I found that to be so beautiful, the way that Brad lays that out. And so I pulled from a lot of these, but like you said, for me, the focus was not, here's the exegetical argument. I did want to give people the so what. The spirituality is, I'm a pastor, right? I am a theologian as well. I have an MDiv. I've studied, I've taken Greek and Hebrew. That's not my focus. That's not my specialty. I've delved into it. But what I am is a pastor, and I really want to help people into a better spirituality. And so I'm hopeful that I've summarized some of the best academic arguments in very brief ways, in succinct ways that like hit home well, but then also give people, I think, the why this matters, and hopefully the presentation of like a better way. And ultimately, when you put these things side by side, like you said, it's like, I don't want to live in that world. I want to live in this world. Totally. And I think that's really, I love that. So that review means a lot. Thanks for the review.
Well, and again, I thought it was great. Your writing is really good. You're very compelling. I've followed you on social media for a while, so I get a bit of your personality through the videos you make, and you're cranking out videos all the time. And so your personality comes out in the book, which is great and very charismatic. People may be like, I don't want to read a book on hell. Like, that sounds heady and heavy, and it's not. You take us along for a ride, and I mean, it can be, I think, triggering depending on like what you were told growing up or how you got into this toxic relationship that you may be becoming aware of. But ultimately, you're offering good news, and that's the point of the gospel. And so anytime you can offer someone good news, it's a good day.
Hell yeah, brother.
Well, Brian, thank you so much, not only for writing a kick-ass book that is going to help a lot of people, but thanks for taking the time. I know you're in the final stretch of book promo, so thanks for sitting down with us, enjoying a nice couple glasses of no.
Thanks for giving me an excuse to drink half a bottle of wine at 4 p.m.
Hey, dude, I totally appreciate it, and really, really appreciate you taking the time to be on the episode with us.
Thanks so much, Jeremy. It's been really fun.
All right, everybody. I'll put the links in the description in the show notes. Go check out Brian's book. You can pre-order it right now. If you're watching this immediately, or depending on when you watch it, it'll be out shortly. This is a book that I think is going to help a lot of people. So go check it out. Support a great guy. And we'll see you on the next episode of Cabernet and Pray.